ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what is going on in the NFC South, but someone has to win this division. It's going to be between one of these three teams, and even at the final week of the season, there could be some massive upsets that could happen and throw the division title to any of these teams. It's just crazy to me how close this thing's going to be. So to start things off, if you can like this video, that'd be greatly appreciated. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the notification bell. And most importantly, if you wish to support the channel even further, become a channel member today and support the channel on a monthly basis. So today, this division is so bad. I honestly felt that Tampa Bay was going to get by, win this division easily. But even they're making this thing so interesting. And even in the, oh my God, the last 4 games for all these teams could have massive implications on who wins this division. So we're going to start off with the Bucs. We'll move to Atlanta, and then we'll go to the Panthers in terms of their routes to the postseason and what they have to do at the bare minimum, assuming the other teams win out. And then we'll talk about these games, their importance, and realistically, what exactly do I think is going to happen? So let's start off with Tampa Bay. At the bare minimum, assuming that the Falcons win out and the Panthers win out, all the Bucs have to do is beat Carolina and Atlanta. If they win those 2 games and they win the 2 other games that are on this docket, that's it. That is it. Tampa Bay would win the division at 8-9 by virtue of best record in the division. That's it. And it's just, oh my God, I cannot believe that that is a remote possibility that we're going to have an 8-9 team or worse represent the South. But unfortunately, that's sometimes how the cookie crumbles. I mean, we just saw it a couple years ago with the NFC East, but here we are a couple of years later, and I can't believe that. Now, the crucial games that I have on here would be Cincinnati, Carolina, and Atlanta. And it's not just because of this. It's because whatever happens with these 2 teams could really impact what the hell happens in this final weekend. Does Tampa have to win? Like, what do they have to do? So all the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have to do is beat these 2 teams. They're in. That's it. They can lose these games against Cincinnati and Arizona, and they are in, regardless of what happens. Now, moving on to Atlanta. Atlanta has a bit of a trickier road to make the postseason. So, with them being at 5-8 and being 1-3 in the division, what they have to do is win out. They would drop Tampa Bay a game, and they would have to hope that Tampa loses 1 additional game, and the Panthers lose 1 game. If that happens, they would win the division based off of overall record at 9-8. These 2 teams would be at 8-9, and Atlanta would be representing the NFC South. So they have a harder route to represent the NFC South, but it is possible. Is it likely? No. They have to go on the road against New Orleans. Okay, you can maybe win that. You have to go on the road versus Baltimore. Okay, that's going to be tough. You had to play Arizona at home. Okay, Arizona just lost Kyler Murray. And then you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home. It's not an easy schedule by any means. However, there is a path for Atlanta. You just kind of have to hope that the Bucs lose in Cincinnati. So then, okay, if we beat them, we're in. And then if the Panthers drop a game, whether it be to whoever here, it really doesn't matter. As long as the Bucs have 8 losses going in to the final game and you have 8 losses going into the final game of the year, it's a win and in, basically, for the Falcons. So, win out, Tampa Bay loss, aside from the Atlanta game, of course, and a Carolina loss. That gets the Atlanta Falcons into the postseason. Finally, the Carolina Panthers. Now, the Carolina Panthers technically control their own destiny. I understand that the Bucs do. However, all they have to do is win out, and they're in by virtue of a division tiebreaker. So, if they win out, you're going to have the Bucs at 9-8, assuming that they win 3 out of the 4 games besides the Carolina game, of course. And then you would have the Panthers that would sweep them, and, it wouldn't matter at that point. So that would decide the division. So again, just to recap what exactly has to happen for each team at the bare minimum, assuming their rivals win out. Tampa Bay, beat Carolina, beat Atlanta, you're in. Doesn't matter what happens in the first 2 games there, right? Falcons, Falcons have to win out, get to 9-8. Then they have to hope that Tampa Bay loses a game along the way and the Panthers lose a game along the way as well prior to that final game, right? And obviously it could happen in the final game of the season too. That's how crazy this thing could go down to the wire. Finally for the Panthers, win out, you're in, no questions asked. There doesn't have to be any other scenarios there. Of course, again, Tampa Bay has the easier path. The Falcons have the hardest path, and the Panthers have the medium path, if you wish to call it that, to getting to the postseason. So with that out of the way, let's get into some important games, and then we'll get into the predictions of what I think is going to happen to close this thing out. So to start things off, this week, Cincinnati, Tampa Bay. Cincinnati's been playing very well. Tampa Bay has not. If Tampa Bay loses that game, of course, opens up the door for Atlanta, and then it also opens up the door to the Panthers to clinch the division in this week when they play Tampa Bay. And the reason why that would happen is because if Tampa Bay loses this game, all the Panthers would have to do is win these 3 games, and the reason why this one would be important is because that would be the sweep, and then even if Tampa Bay wins against Atlanta the following week, and the Panthers lose against New Orleans, it would be a 4-2 split between the two teams for the division, but guess what? Panthers got the sweep, so it doesn't matter. They would win the NFC South at an 8-9 record. That's why that game is so damn important for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you win that game, you pretty much put the division on ice, but if you lose that game, you open up the door for Atlanta and Carolina to really get back into the mix of things, especially if they win their respective games. If they do not, is the path still open? Yeah, but very, very, very small, to say the least. So there's that. Next, the Carolina and Tampa Bay matchup in Week 17. That's going to be massive for both of them. Why? Because it really comes down to what happens in these games over here, right? The Panthers had to play Pittsburgh. They had to play Detroit, both of which at home. Good for them. You got Detroit, who is surging at the moment. They are trying to make a last-minute playoff push. And Pittsburgh is rebuilding. They're just trying to put some shit together. But, yeah, you should be able to beat Pittsburgh. But as for Detroit, that might be tough, but if you do beat those two teams, right, this is where this game comes in huge. Because if the Bucs lose these 2 games, and if you beat if you beat the Bucs, if you're Carolina, you got yourself a home field ahead of you to get this division locked up, which I believe is crazy how the margin for error is very small for these teams. Very, very small. Because if you lose, you open up the door for the other teams to get into it, and then you kind of look back and you're like, shit, I wish we won that game, right? And then, of course, you have the final games of the season with Atlanta and Tampa Bay playing each other and the Panthers and New Orleans playing each other, because you have division tiebreakers that will be at play, and I honestly hope it comes down to the final week, because it's going to be so fun watching these teams go at it to figure out who's getting in, unless someone wants to be an asshole and win it beforehand. So, to kind of look at it this way, if I'm being realistic, which team, if you're the second place team in the NFC East, whether it's Dallas or Philadelphia, would you prefer? If I'm being real with you, I would probably prefer the Falcons. They just are a mess. You could argue the Panthers, but the Panthers have been playing decent football of recent, so there's that. And then the Bucs, they got Tom Brady. Tom Brady in the postseason, we all know what's going to happen, but realistically, I mean, if Tom Brady's not in it, I think it's going to be tough to see one of these teams actually compete, especially against the 2 NFC East teams that could end up being here. So there is that. So let's go over each of the games, what I think is going to happen, and who I think is going to finally win the NFC South. The moment of truth. So what I'm going to do is to make this simple, I'm going to just use my black marker. So the Bucs versus Cincinnati. I think that Cincinnati will beat the Bucs, so that will be an L there for them. I think that the Falcons will beat the Saints in New Orleans, and I think that the Panthers will beat Pittsburgh. I think that's what's going to happen in week 1, right? So now you have 6-8, 6-8, 6-8. So then we have the next week, and you'll have Detroit taking on the Panthers. I personally think that Detroit is going to lose that game, and the reason for that is because Detroit's weird. Like, they have this thing where they'll go on a bit of a run, and it's like, oh, we might make the postseason, we might do something crazy this year, or hey, this is where we're trending, and then they have a gut check loss, and I think that's what's going to happen here. For the Falcons, I think that they're going to lose to the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore, and then this is a huge game for the Bucs here, because now you have the Panthers, who would have won 2 straight games, getting them to a 7-8 record. You can't afford to go to 6-9. If you go to 6-9, then you're kind of hoping to God that you can win these next 2 games, and you really don't want to be in a position where, okay, I have to win these next 2 games, right? I mean, sure, it's easier said than done. Like, you know, hey, okay, all you got to do is beat Carolina and Atlanta, you're in. But that's the problem. You have to beat both of them now. And so I do think that the Bucs will win in Arizona because of that fact. And so now you would have a... I can't believe that this is the world we're living in, where we have another division that's sub 500. So you're going to have the 7-8 Bucs, the 6-9 Falcons, and the 7-8 Panthers, which leads to a critical matchup with Carolina and Tampa Bay. I do think, to get the easy one out of the way, I do think the Falcons will win that game in Arizona. I think that the Panthers, honestly, I think they're going to lose that game to Tampa Bay, and it's primarily because I don't see a way where the Bucs are getting swept by the Panthers. I just don't see it, especially in Tampa Bay. I think that they'll take care of business there, and then in the final week of the season, I think that the Bucs will sweep Atlanta. That's an L there, and then I think the Panthers will win there. So your final records are going to be 9-8. And then you're going to have 7-10, and then you're going to have 8-9. That's how I think the NFC South's going to look. I think that Tampa Bay is a lock to make the postseason, in my personal opinion, because of the way that the roster is constructed. They're a better team than both the Falcons and the Panthers. There is no reason for Tampa Bay not to make the postseason. However, we've seen crazier things. If Tampa Bay beats Cincinnati, I think it's a clear cut. Okay, they're good. But a loss to Cincinnati opens up the door for these 2 teams. And I'm telling you, do not let that chance slip from you, Tampa Bay. I'm telling you. But if you were asking me, as an objective NFL fan, which team out of these would you want to face the most? Me personally, it's the Falcons. I think that the Falcons are the team that you would want to face. They don't have a really good roster. I mean, you can argue that for the Panthers because they don't have a quarterback really. With the Falcons, they at least have Mariota. But I think that overall with the Panthers, they're playing good football at the right time. The Falcons, that's kind of where you're looking at this and you're like, okay, realistically, if you're not playing Tom Brady, I think you're fine because you have the chance of going up against playoff Tom Brady. But the Bucs got this division. I don't see a reason, and maybe I'm jinxing them. Who knows? But yeah, that is the path for all 3 of these teams. If you're a Cowboys fan or Eagles fan, if you don't want to face Tom Brady in the postseason, you're hoping that the Bucs lose some games, and you're hoping the Panthers win their games. So your rooting guide would be have the Falcons and the Panthers win out, and the Bucs just lose. Alrighty, guys, so that wraps up our coverage of who I think is going to win the NFC South and what you want to keep an eye out on. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, once again, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, hit the notification bell, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Alright, guys, have a good one.